Hello and welcome to, I'm not sure if I'm going to brand this as Anime Kiwi or Movie Kiwi, but I guess it doesn't matter if you're listening to it, so whatever. I'm Mike, and as usual with anime stuff, I have, introduce yourselves, I guess. Dota first.
I'm Cat Dota. I'm the person that's been tortured with anime for the last, nearly a year now or something?
Almost, yeah.
I'm Mary. I do some stuff on GameSpot, and I also like anime in my free time.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Satoshi Kon's for full-length movie things today. So that would be, I'm going to try and remember the order here. I think it was Perfect Blue first, and then Tokyo Godfather, Millennium Actress, Paprika. That sounds right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Should we talk about why this even began in the first place?
So Dota was talking to me, hey, I want to watch some good anime. And then I said, I think I told you to watch Paranoia Agent. And you did that.
Well, I mentioned that one of the few anime movies that I'd seen that I liked quite a lot was Perfect Blue, and that I wanted to see something more in that vein rather than like the giant robot kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then you just mentioned that, that's directed by this guy named Satoshi Kon, and he's well known, and you should just watch his stuff. And then this kind of grew out from there.
Yeah. Then I told you to watch all his stuff, and I'd try and get Mary on the horn to record with us about it.
Yeah, it turns out, like, without spoiling the rest of this podcast, turns out that was a really, really good suggestion.
Yeah, and then you watch Paranoia Agent just for completion's sake.
I just watched it because I wanted to. That's how good his stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all pretty good, and it's all very clear that it's by the same guy. He's got a very distinct style. So if you like one, it's very likely you're going to like the others just because they have that similar vibe going on.
Although his style does pretty clearly evolve through the 4 or 5. I'm going to count Paranoia Agent as a full thing.
I agree. I think it's just an elongated form of one of his films.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Paranoia Agent, and I guess we should just cover that because we probably won't talk much about that, is, like, from what I've been able to tell, a lot of the episodes in that anime are basically just stuff that was cut from the rest of his films and that he wanted to explore further.
Yeah, and you can tell that with especially Millennium Actress and Tokyo Godfathers. Like, Tokyo Godfather straight up has the gossiping ladies in it doing their thing.
Also, his use of conveying story without proper use of timelines, so he cuts back and forth between various times.
Yep.
So that's like kind of his signature style.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really interesting about his style and what makes it really important, not just in like an anime context, but filmmaking as a whole, is that when he's cutting around from timelines and stuff, he's not cutting just to confuse people or to be like fancy or whatever. He's cutting based on what is most important for the story he's trying to tell at the time, and like timeline be damned, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say he's very motivated director, and that's certainly not just a artistic direction, but he's also he's not just the director of these pieces, but he's the screenwriter, he's the writer in many cases, or in all these cases. So this isn't just his interpretation, this was his vision from the get-go, and he conveys those a lot of times by blurring the lines of reality and fantasy, or, you know, like awake and dream, or all these different states of mind, both for the characters and for the viewer. And I think that's such a unique thing that he is able to accomplish so brilliantly. So yeah, he's not just doing it because he thinks it looks cool, or, you know, it's like a visual style. It's the way that he, I think, helps blur those lines of what you're watching, whether or not you believe that what you're seeing is reality or a dream state or a vision or whatever it may be. And in some cases, an actual scene from a movie, so he does that often, and he's quite good at it.
Yeah, in the case of Perfect Blue, he does all three at once, and it's kind of incredible that he's even able to pull it off.
Absolutely. And we'll probably get into this more, but it's also done through a tremendous use of transitions because, it's just one thing to cut from a strange scene to reaction, but he doesn't do that. He actually makes use of transitions in the sense where you actually don't know that you're in a new scene anymore. Sometimes it can take like 10 to 15 seconds to process that you've left a scene and you're in a new one.
And there were a few times, especially in Perfect Blue, that he would cut and it was clear that you were in a new scene, but the new scene would finish the beat that the previous scene had finished in a really striking way.
Yeah. Perfect Blue is such a good one to start on, and that's because it's one of the most fluid uses of transitions, both from a dreamlike state, right? Because often you'll be in a scene and all of a sudden the lead character will wake up and you'll question, is she waking up because we're now past time? Or are we waking up because that was a dream and now we're back in reality? And then he also does it when you think you're in a scene and all of a sudden they say cut and you're not sure if what you saw was just a scene or if time passed and now you're watching a part in a time later on. So it's constantly making the viewer, and again the lead character, the actress, as it were, question what's happening anymore. You never know if what you're watching is actually real, if it's a dream, if it's a scene in a film. All those things are starting to be questioned.
Yeah, and it really, I feel, I don't know, accurate's not the right word, but effectively portrays the state of mind she's in, because it feels like when it cuts from a scene and then cuts to her waking up, that's as she was perceiving those events. It's a good reflection of her mental state throughout the movie and her doubting her sanity nearer the end.
Yeah, I think that movie is like almost entirely about the state of mind of that character, and the cuts are like kind of in like integral to that. When it's cutting, it's all based on her state of mind rather than something like a plot point. It's really trying to sell the idea that, her place within the entertainment industry is causing her a lot of emotional distress. And are we going into Perfect Blue proper? I think
might as well. We pretty naturally ended up here, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But I have a reading of this film, and I kind of wanted to bounce it off you guys, because something that's consistent across all of Satoshi Kon's films is that he has like kind of a sensitivity to what you would call like oppressed peoples in society, whether you're talking about the homeless or transgender people in the case of Tokyo Godfathers, or
anti-government people.
Yeah, or women in the case of Perfect Blue. And I think, and this is quite rare in Japanese filmmaking, I think Satoshi Kon was a feminist, and this movie is kind of a takedown of the Japanese entertainment industry and how it kind of chews up and spits out women.
I find that really fascinating. I never even considered that, really. And thinking about it now, it certainly portrays her as a victim in more ways than one, not just as a literal victim of someone of stalking, someone who's in danger, but also as someone who wasn't taken seriously. She had a lot of red flags that she wasn't okay. People didn't take her seriously. She was the first one to kind of verbalize that there was something wrong, and people told her to relax or not to worry about it. How she was portrayed so quickly, sexualized and things like that, and how she dealt with it quite professionally, but in a very dark way, where she felt like that was just the way it was. I think that's something people often say, like, oh, that's just the way it is, like that's what you have to do to make it. And it's a very dark film, and it's a very dark interpretation of the way women are treated. But yeah, I don't think it's a positive reflection in any way. So if it is in that sense, I believe it's kind of an ugly look at the realities of the way we perceive women in entertainment.
To go all the way down the rabbit hole, Dodar, I'm having trouble seeing your reading in Paprika and Paranoia Agent, unless you don't think it permeates his whole body of work, in which case disregard that. But
It's Paranoia Agent is basically like all about those sorts of characters. Like if you look at like the prostitute character with the dissociative personality disorder, and the people who are trying to commit suicide, which is kind of like a retread on some of Tokyo Godfather's ideas and stuff.
mhm.
But Paprika is less about that sort of stuff and more about his fascination with film and dreams and stuff like that.
Okay.
But when it comes to like the reason I arrived at that reading of Perfect Blue is because like when I watched it, my immediate reaction to the ending was that they kind of rushed it and then it didn't really make sense, and I struggled with that for like 2 days or something.
Are you talking about the actual ending where she's in the mental hospital?
Yeah, the where they reveal that it was her overweight friend that was like the killer the whole time, and it just seemed like they just rushed that to tie it all up. But I started thinking about the themes of the entertainment industry and how she's treated and stuff, and I kind of arrived at the idea that I forget the character's name, but she's one of the managers, I think. But yeah, in my mind, that character kind of represents somebody who,
I think her name was Rumi.
yeah, that sounds right. She kind of represents, sometimes in like feminist circles, you get women who attack each other, like not a good enough woman. And to me, she represented somebody that was saying you're not being famous correctly, you're not respecting yourself, and you're not protecting your own body or your sanity or whatever. And you can see that, like they actually kind of foreshadowed that earlier on in the film, where she's the only character that gets really, really distressed by what's happening, like apart from the main character. And so when I started thinking about that, the whole film sort of came together in my mind, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's actually trying to say something really important with this film. And so I don't think that the ending's rushed anymore. I think it kind of makes complete sense for the story he was trying to tell.
Yeah, Perfect Blue, I didn't have like any problem with like the narrative beats, the theme, any of that stuff. It all fit like really well in my mind the first time. It felt like basically it's almost, I would say, almost a perfect anime movie, or a perfect movie period in my mind.
I was to say, I agree. Like, I think it had really good highs and lows and a really perfect character arc. If you take away all of the transitions that might make you question what's happening, and if you just look at the timeline of the story, you're looking at a plot of a girl who believes that something's wrong, that she might be being pursued, but at the same state, the person that she's playing, she's an actress now in the show or in that movie, is very reflective of what's happening to her, and they're using that as foreshadowing as to a lot of what's happening, like the fact that they think that she had multiple personalities and she herself was the killer. That wasn't just to trick us, that was alluding to what was going to happen. And then you have this guy, this like kind of crazy guy that's stalking her, that you might think is the main bad guy the whole time, but that's all kind of, that was
Is a half red herring.
Yes, to hide the fact that there was the person closest to her was actually the problem the entire time. So it's a brilliant, I think, way to misdirect the viewer. And when you get to that conclusion, although, and I do agree, so little of the movie is shown for that reveal of who she really was, Rumi. But when you get to that, it's such an interesting moment. And then I think after that happens, and it's also really strange, the very last moment of the film is her looking in the mirror and saying, it's me, I'm the real girl that you always thought. And it's like really, it's a very strange, rushed ending, but I think
And it wasn't completely rushed in my mind.
It's reflective.
yeah, because that whole last action sequence was both with Crazy Rumi and with her mental imbalance. I guess I don't know how to say what's going
Kind
on
of her
in her brain.
psychosis, I would guess that
Yeah,
that
sure.
represents.
That's a smarter word for it than what I was saying. I'll go with that. So I found something. It's from an essay in a book called Cinema Anime, and the essay is called "Excuse Me, Who Are You? Performance, the Gaze, and the Female in the Works of Satoshi Kon." And he said, in reference to his interest in female characters, that they're easier to write because he isn't able to know female characters the same way as he would a male character, and he can, quote, project my obsession onto the characters and expand the aspects I want to describe. So I'm not sure how much that closes your thoughts on it, or if it adds a new wrinkle to them, or what are your thoughts on?
Well, I think it's especially the case with this film that this is a film in many ways about obsession, so it definitely does give me a clearer picture of why this movie turned out the way it is, and I think this is probably the tightest of Satoshi Kon's films, as in the most cohesive and whole idea, and some of his other films are a bit more distracted than this, but I try to avoid being effusive with my praise of certain films because I don't like hyperbole or whatever. There's a friend of Mikey and ours who constantly goes on in the most effusive way he can about films, and it's really, really annoying, but I think Perfect Blue is legitimately a masterpiece. There's almost nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I would easily rate it 10 out of 10 full marks.
Yeah, easily.
The only thing I could mark it down is I tried the English dub, and it's fine. It's not great though. I almost immediately switched to back to the Japanese dub, but that's not a ding on the film as originally released.
Yeah, dubs are dubs, you get what you get.
It's a 1997 anime dub, or 1999. I don't know when it came out over here.
Yeah, I think I saw the dub first, and it was good enough.
Yeah,
and for people who don't like dealing with having to read subtitles or for whatever reason just don't want to do it, the dubs work good enough. You will get the overall state of what's happening and you'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
Not all the scenes carry the same weight though.
Yeah, the more confronting scenes in the Japanese dub, the filmed rape scenes, I guess you'd call them, even though they're not supposed to be real. Those are way more distressing in the Japanese version because whoever's playing the character there is really getting into the role by the sounds of it, and it's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, that was kind of hard to watch.
This is not a happy film. You're not gonna have a good time when you watch this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable either way, and I think they really did want to push you in many ways with what you deem okay and not okay. I mean, very quickly Mima starts to have anxiety because the second she gets the internet and she checks out, I think it's Mima's room.
Yeah.
That's the website. She realizes that so much of her life is being described, that someone knows too much about her. This is really early in the film when she comes to this conclusion. So the fact that in the first 15 minutes, there's a really stressful thing happening, you know that you're in for a very long, exhausting film. There's almost no relief. I can't think of a time where I laughed during this film. There's almost no relief from the anxiety that you feel.
Yeah, I agree.
When I often talk with Mikey about the sort of films that I really like and that I really get into, and I often talk about those movies being real but also weird at the same time, and Perfect Blue is the perfect example of that. It's if somebody made a movie in a lab out of parts of things that I like a lot, this would be the movie that it comes out. So, you know, I don't condone what is depicted in the film as such, but like this style of story is something that I love so much, and the entire reason that I wanted to get into more anime in the first place is because, like, if more things out there like this film exist, I want to see them, and I kind of, I need to see them because this movie is great in every way.
Yeah. So to get back up to a more base level, I guess, if there was just one thing in the movie that made you think, yep, that's it, that's amazing, what would that be? Your favorite moment, thing, single point?
I can go. I think that this is probably going to be mentioned multiple times, and I have to give a shout out to Every Frame of Painting, which you guys might have heard of. Yeah, Tony does such a wonderful job conveying this, and I do think it. Anyone who's hearing this has probably also seen his tremendous video, which expresses Satoshi Kon's beautiful use of transitions. Perfect Blue has tremendous scene matching to make you really confuse what's happening. There's multiple times where I was completely broken with whether or not I had witnessed a dream or a real scene. There's this scene where you open a door into another scene and it's so fluid that you would not believe that you were in a new scene. It happens like more towards the end of this film. That's kind of like when she's getting more stressed out and you're starting to see transition over transition over transition. But I love the scene matching in this movie so much towards the end when she's really starting to lose it. So I think this is towards the end of the movie and they're kind of wrapping up. And she's basically, you're hearing action, and then she's waking up, and then action, and then she's waking up, and you have no idea how much of reality you're actually watching anymore. And I think it's very beautifully depicted how she's losing her mind, and you don't know what you're seeing is real anymore. Both of you are in the same state of mind, which is you don't know. You're questioning everything. I think it's brilliantly done.
Yeah, the scene that got me, especially in regards to that, was when they were summing up the reveal for the drama she was in. I wasn't sure if the whole thing we just watched was her acting out that stuff in her mind or if that was the end to the drama.
You mean with like the TV show with the cops?
Yeah, if they were saying that the character herself was raped and the whole what we just watched was her fantasy, or if that was the in-fiction show we were watching that they were ending.
Yeah, the really incredible thing with Perfect Blue is there's 3 layers of reality going on all at once with the TV show that she's in and the movie that she's in and her proper reality, and they mix constantly. But and then there's also like I kind of forgot this part, but there's also the reality where she thinks that she's the killer. Like there's a moment where you see essentially her killing one of the victims with an ice pick, and I think that's one of the stronger visual moments of the film. Like it's has one of the most like hardest impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I think that was a great scene as well. She's like the pizza delivery guy, and at first you're not sure if it's the killer, but then it's very clearly her, and it's such a shock. And then she wakes up and you realize she didn't. I think later on in that same scene, she opens her closet and finds bloody clothes, and then again you're like, oh, it is her again. But then they go back and it's not her again. So it's so confusing whether or not it's her.
I forgot all about the bloody clothes thing. I didn't.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of the film, that whole scene, and then transition into seeing the costume in the closet. But the really interesting thing about that is that was after she was drugged with the tea, I think, the sleeping tea.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see like the kind of lengths that her manager
is going to gaslight her.
Yeah, like mentally torture her. Like she was doing all sorts of horrible, messed up stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of reflection in that film to Black Swan, if you think about it. How often in Black Swan, the lead character is are not sure if they just committed a crime or if they were dreaming. And you're constantly confused of whether or not they've done it, because they're waking up so often. It could be a dream, but it could also be real. I think now, and it takes me like several times to do this. Like I feel like I have to watch every one of his movies twice because I might miss something. But I think I just assumed that those clothes weren't there and she was dreaming. But I think those clothes were there, right? And it was Rumi putting the bloody clothes in her closet to mess with her. Is that probably what happened? Yeah,
because that makes perfect sense to me.
Rumi was wearing her outfit, her like outfit that she sings in later on, right? So she borrows her clothes all the time and like wore them to go do things or like pretend that she was her. So I think those were actual clothes, and that really must have messed with her mentally.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, preceding that scene, she's drugged with like a sleeping tea, so it kind of like gives you an idea of what she was able to do in her room, just whatever she wanted, take any clothes that she wanted.
Yeah. As for my favorite thing in the movie, it was just one cut near the very end when the crazy, creepy dude, she turns around to face him, and then it cuts to Rumi slamming the trunk of the car shut. I thought that cut was amazing.
It's like a smash cut or something, isn't it?
Yeah, almost literally.
It's a quick turn of events that kind of alludes that
she got smacked up the head.
Yeah. Also, a really good shout out to the way he did violence in that, because there were times when he showed very brutal violence, but there's this one scene in a car parking lot where I think it's not the director. Oh, it's the writer that wrote the rape scene. So he was like the one to blame, the screenwriter. He hears the music, and he's wondering where it came from. He's like alone in a parking garage, and it's kind of getting creepier and creepier, and he's getting more uncomfortable. And then when the elevator opens, it's the boombox playing the music at full volume, and you kind of see his reaction. And then the next shot is the elevator opening to his dead body. Yeah. And I just think that's like a really great way to build tension. And he doesn't show anything, but you're pretty scared after seeing something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, so something that that is interesting about that scene that I kind of wanted to mention, it kind of goes into my my reading that I mentioned earlier, is that one of the things you'll notice is that his eyes are gouged out.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, he's responsible for the whole, like, I guess male gaze, you could call it. And so his eyes were removed as a result.
Yeah. And that happened with, was it the director that got killed too by Dreama?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's a consistent thing that the killer did, was he was gouging out the eyes of the victims.
Yeah. And I hear that pup.
Yeah, sorry.
It's
I have
fine.
a dog since the last time, and he is not enjoying the fact that I won't let him hang out. So he's reminding me.
Mine's jumped up into my chair with me while I've been recording before, so whatever. Dogs are gonna be dogs.
I'm sure our listeners are dog fans, so they'll probably be even happier that the dog showed up.
I certainly hope they are.
It's a podcast. You guys probably... It's a shame you guys can't see it, because right now he's just climbing my body to remind me that he's here. And to punish me for ignoring him.
Please don't forget me.
It's impossible.
Well, he's very audible at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Sounds like one clingy pup.
Yeah, he's in his puppy stage. I think this is difficult for him. This is also Saturday. He's like, this is the day we typically hang out. I don't understand what's going on.
So it sounds like we're about done with Paranoia Agent. Or not Paranoia Agent, Perfect Blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll end that with, this is probably by far my favorite of the 5 things that he's done.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is his best film.
Yep, tip top.
Yeah, I think in terms of the way it was written and directed, I think it's brilliantly done. In terms of, I think I've enjoyed other films more. This one's really stressful and it's hard to get through, but I respect this film greatly. I think it's tremendously done, and I give it a lot of credit for how wonderful it is.
Yeah. Also, the one thing we didn't talk about is I noticed that the animation, his style, it really changed from this movie through to Paprika. This one almost looks more like an average anime. Not completely like one, but it's very different from like Millennium Actress or Tokyo Godfather. That's very much his con animation in his prime.
Well, I think yeah, like the transition from Perfect Blue to Tokyo Godfathers to his like later work with Paranoia Agent, where his visual style had kind of been cemented. Like the differences are pretty stark between those three films. Like I mean, just animation style. But this is kind of a side note, but like, have any of you seen a movie called Green Room recently?
Have not.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. That's that horror movie about violence. I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think like the closest movie that I've seen recently tonally to Perfect Blue is that movie, and it's kind of the same, like completely harrowing from beginning to end, but also extremely good.
Okay.
So I think anybody who likes Perfect Blue should pretty much immediately go see Green Room, but it's also not a fun time, so bear that in mind.
Yeah, I've heard. No, I mean, the trailer looked already like it was going to be incredibly violent. But what I loved, and I haven't seen it, but I had a friend who saw it and told me what's really wonderful about it is how the entire film is actually surrounded by the concept of violence, right? So, like, the characters believe that they know what violence is and that they understand it, that they're desensitized, and then they experience real violence. And it's a reflection of violence in our society. So it's the way that we all, you and I might perceive violence. We might feel like we know violence because we've seen violence. You've seen it in films, or you've read a book about like that had something really violent in it, but there's something very different when there's actual violence. So it seems like it's actually really cool, but again, I haven't seen it, but I've heard such good things about it.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it to anybody who likes this sort of film, like, and doesn't think movies should generally be fun and happy and enjoyable. Like, if you don't mind being mentally tortured for a couple of hours, then yeah, Green Room is very similar tonally to this. But yeah, like something that's interesting about Green Room is it doesn't really linger on its violence. Like, it uses it for impact, so it doesn't. Like, it's not a gory film as such, even though there is gore in it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sensitive to that sort of stuff, which I definitely am, it's definitely not, like, it's not a torture porn or a Saw sort of movie. It uses its violence for impact.
Okay. That sounds like a good rec you just gave right there. So, shall we move on to the next movie? Which we got it wrong in the beginning. Tokyo Godfathers was the third one. Millennium Actress came second.
Yeah, like Tokyo Godfathers is interesting because I think this movie it stands out the most out of his library.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the most singular of all these movies he made.
This one doesn't really fit in, I guess.
It fits in the sense that it kind of examines like the dregs of society in a way, like a bunch of his other work does.
Yeah, and all of his stuff is more or less a character piece, like on one or two people, really jumping into their brains real hard.
But when we're talking about the kind of transition in his animation style, like the thing that really stands out in terms of animation with Tokyo Godfathers is like the animation of the characters is very exaggerated and very like
it's super expressive.
Yeah, it's very expressive and what I'd call hyper realistic, I guess. Like they take what would be a normal body movement and they exaggerate it a lot. And that kind of extends to the backgrounds. The backgrounds almost look like somebody took a photo and kind of exaggerated elements of the photo. So this movie has like this whole hyper-realism thing going on, and it looks really, really, like visually, this is probably one of his more interesting films.
But then when he wants a character to express someone, he's not afraid to remind you, hey, this is a cartoon you're watching. They can be super, super expressive.
Mm. There's a lot of subliminal things that Kon does to help convey these characters to the viewer in a way that makes them empathize with them. One of the things that he does is he has an establishing shot that ends up being a character point of view.
Mhm.
So you might be feeling like you're just watching a film or a scene, and then it turns out that you're watching it from the eyes of a character that you're observing. And this makes you immediately relate to that character, even if it's on a subliminal level, because you have seen the world through their eyes. I think that's such a wonderful way, because these characters are quite ranged, and none of them are perfect. A lot of them are very complex. They have a lot of issues. And yet throughout this entire film, you're constantly asked to like them, to love them, to understand them. And I love how not only does he do that through the story to get you to relate and like them, but visually he's constantly showing you the world through their eyes. And that way you are more interested in being on their side.
I think, and it's a lot more prominent in this movie. I think one of the most remarkable things about Khan's style is he's not an overuser of like an extreme close-up.
Mhm.
He uses them very rarely, and it's always to kind of punctuate a very important plot point.
Mm.
Like that's one of the things that annoys me so much about current directors, especially in American film, where like the entire movie's in close-up, and you know, it seems like directors these days are afraid to film things in a wide shot for some reason, and going to like filmmakers in different countries and stuff like Khan, and seeing that, you know, different ways to do things, different ways to cut, different ways to frame. He's one of the best examples of that in Japan, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be something that a lot of directors are guilty of, because it emphasizes drama and intense situations. So it's an easy way to add dramatic effect to a scene that doesn't deserve it, but can help keep the viewer's attention longer. But Satoshi Kon only emphasizes things that truly need it. And he is quite limited with those types of shots. So I think when he does do an extreme close-up, it's very impactful.
And on that same note, another thing that he does that a lot of modern directors don't do is he makes the most of not having sound. He uses silence very effectively when you watch a lot of movies from nowadays, it's like there always has to be some sort of something in the background. They can't leave a frame silent.
Mm.
And this movie is effective, but I think it's especially effective in horror stuff. I didn't notice as much in Perfect Blue because I was pretty into that, so I had a harder time noticing technical stuff because that just sucked me in. But this one, he really used silence to say, hey, this is really important. Pay attention to this. Don't get distracted by music or anything besides the scene right here. And he also uses it to build tension really effectively.
Humor as well.
Yeah.
He does it for tension, but there's this film is really funny, and he uses close-ups and wide shots intermittently to show the faces of the people in humorous ways. Specifically, like Okama, I think that's the transgendered character, and she's really funny. It's a very funny character in a very stressful situation, and he's constantly visually telling visual jokes with her facial expressions.
Yeah, like this movie definitely isn't afraid to like make jokes out of these characters, but like not in a mean-spirited way. Like it's almost like a self-deprecating in a way. Like if you were in this situation, you would probably make fun of yourself in similar ways that these characters do.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also, by all means, a really depressing film. It's about an alcoholic person who has like a young girl who's run away from her family. I'd rather be homeless than hang out with her family. And a transgendered person who is, I think, afraid to get older and wants to be a mother and can't. So it's like a really difficult film, and consistently, you know, there's a lot of death in it. I think there's like a violent scene where you're talking about like basically bums getting beat up on the street, and it's dark, and they find a way to constantly put a smile on your face. I think of actually all of his films, this one made me smile the most, which is shocking considering the material he's working with.
Yeah, I think a very important element of this movie is trying to find that happiness and that levity in a situation that is just about the worst you could possibly get if you live in a country like Japan. Being homeless and being like, if you're a homeless transgendered person in Japan, it probably doesn't get much worse than that, really.
Yeah, I can't think of a whole lot worse than that in Japan. Maybe if you're one of the unspeakable class too, but
yeah, like it's just, you know, people like us who've been exposed to, like, I'm not as exposed to anime as Mikey is, or probably you, Mary, but I've played so many Japanese games over my lifetime, and the thing that really stands out with Kon's films as opposed to that is that culturally you don't really see like a lot of progressivism coming out of Japan. You don't really see films that you could say are like feminist films, for example. Like, I can't think of anything else other than like Perfect Blue that I would describe like wholeheartedly as like a feminist work in like Japanese filmmaking or animation or game making. Like, I've been playing Tokyo Mirage Sessions lately on the Wii U, and it is decidedly like it's not very progressive when it comes to portraying its female characters. I'll put it that way.
yeah, that sounds about right. Japan is, from all of what I've seen, pretty traditional, conservative culturally. They're slowly changing, but it's taking a long time since it's mainly older people in charge across the board in business and government.
There's a lot of films about coming of age tales for women that I think are quite powerful and poignant and honest. But I do believe that Satoshi Kon covers dark elements with elegance.
Yeah.
He's not just saying this is an issue maybe for their particular culture, but for the world itself. I don't think he specifically targets any government or anything like that. So he's able to kind of get away with these as just a representation to help, convey the character. But it is a reflection of society. So yeah, I agree. Like, in terms of how dark his films get, I don't think I've ever seen any other anime do it with such elegance.
Yeah, like his portrayal of like these social issues in his films is less of like examining a single character and their coming of age, and more like societal, like structural issues on a whole, like the issue of homelessness in this movie particularly. Like, it's something that, from what I know, is like acknowledged but not really talked about much in Japan, is the homelessness.
Yeah.
So when he takes something like this and the entire film is about homelessness and the effect it has on these people, like, I treasure that so much about Kon, where he just like kind of says, screw it, this is the movie I'm trying to make and this is the story I'm trying to tell. And if people like, are offended by it because they don't want to have to think about this stuff, then he doesn't really care about that.
Yeah, but he's delivering it in such a soft way that you might not even realize that you're watching a film about homelessness. You might think that you're watching a film about a young girl who's got family problems and some wacky characters help her along her journey. Like, I would say it's multi-layered, like a child's film is with adult themes, in that you might not actually be aware that you're actually viewing something quite heavy because it's conveyed in such a humorous way. Yeah, half the time I didn't even realize what a depressing film it was, because it's really funny and it's brilliantly written.
Yeah, he's a very empathetic director. Like, he has empathy for his characters. He's not just trying to portray a certain social issue and then grandstand about it or whatever. He's very much trying to show you, like, this is why you should care about an issue like homelessness, because this is the effect it has on these people who, there are probably a bunch of people in Japan that are very real and like these characters, and they should probably get help from the government and people around them.
Yeah.
It also has a pretty nice ending as well, actually. I think there is some death, but I think overall everyone has a happy ending, I'm pretty sure. And that really kind of helps seal the deal as like a nice lighthearted Christmas film, because this whole thing takes place on Christmas Eve. I think it's either Christmas Eve or it's New Year's Eve. I think it's Christmas Eve.
It's Christmas too.
Yeah, and it's like, it's almost just like this holiday film, about coming together, but from the perspective of three really depressed, possibly suicidal homeless people.
Yeah,
they
feel like the suicide group from Paranoia Agent, like pretty
Oh
heavily.
yeah, I forgot about that. There's actually maybe something to take away there. I mean, imagine a group that is constantly trying to take their own life, and how much you enjoy them, and how much comedy you get out of them failing to kill themselves. Like, what a strange concept that is.
Yeah, it's almost like that's an alternate reality version of this movie.
Yeah, as far as I know, like that's one of the cut scenes from this film. Supposedly there was supposed to be a scene where they all tried to commit suicide, but it kept failing. But he kind of cut that and left it for Paranoia Agent.
Yeah, Paranoia Agent, like you thought it is pretty much all scraps of stuff that he liked but didn't think he could fit into a full film. And it worked pretty amazingly still, even though it's a bunch of kind of disparate things.
Yeah, it's Con's Cutting Room Floor, the TV show, and it's brilliant.
And like this movie literally has the gossip women from Paranoia Agent in it, gossiping about stuff. The same character models.
I didn't actually notice that. I should go back and have a look at them.
Yeah, at the very least, the old woman is the same. And then the movie ends on even lighter note, as in the credits are going. It's just random doofy dancing buildings going through the whole credits, which I thought was kind of an interesting touch.
Maybe just to help convey that it's a nice, lighthearted holiday film.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, I kind of got this sense, I'm not sure if you guys did, but it kind of felt like the backgrounds, almost like the characters weren't really interacting with them. Like the background is just kind of this looming presence, and because it's snowing constantly and it's extremely cold, it's a light-hearted film, but it almost feels like the backgrounds in this film are like this looming threat that if they stay out too long in the cold, they might die. Yeah, and it's like the backgrounds look almost surreal.
Well, I think that is probably driving home the point about how in danger the homeless in Japan and everywhere are, especially in extreme conditions. Heavy snow, heavy heat, what have you.
Yeah, there's only a few scenes indoors, but they're typically very comforting and warm and welcoming. There's like the scene where the transgendered person goes back to, I think they call her mother. It's like the person who raised her.
Yeah, it's like the mama-san of that.
Yeah, and it's such a warm scene, right? You're like getting out of the cold and you're in this loving kind of fake home environment where she was raised, and there's a lot of it's just a very comforting area with the juxtaposition of the outdoors. There's also the scene where the old homeless guy, who I think ends up passing away, they're comfortable and they're in this shelter with him in this tent, like in this makeshift home that he made for himself. Again, kind of helping convey the fact that at least when you're in a self-contained area like that you're warm and happy and at peace. It's just so shocking. Almost all the upsetting scenes are happening outside. They're alone and scared, and they're looking for a home.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if we take the homelessness themes further, like almost like the violence used in Perfect Blue when it's used for impact, you could picture being indoors as sort of the same thing in this movie, where being indoors is used for impact. Like, you or I might take being inside for granted, and whereas these homeless people, being inside is like a precious thing that might save their life.
It's a luxury, absolutely. Those are things you don't even think about, that for most homeless, if they're panhandling or whatever, and they're able to scrape together $20-$30. I mean, a night in a hotel is, even like a really cheap motel, you're looking at like $70 to $100. Like, that's a lot of money for one night in a home.
Yeah.
And also, like something we didn't mention is that this movie tries to emphasize like the importance of family, and especially like what that has like its effect on homelessness. Like every character in this film, they're homeless because of the breakdown of their family life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. A lot of these people are homeless, well, by choice. There's a problem with their family that kind of turned them into the streets in a sense. So they're not just, they're not just without. They have like chosen a lifestyle and now they don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. Although that, not directly that, but my main complaint with this movie is that we didn't get enough backstory for the main characters. That might just be a personal complaint, and you guys think, oh, they gave enough of that. But I would have liked to have a little bit more background on their past and how things broke down.
Well, I think the movie does just enough to tell its story, basically. Maybe they were a little bit underdeveloped, but that's kind of the difficulty when you've got a movie that like centers on three people, like because they're all kind of equal protagonists. Maybe the young girl a bit more, but
then you get her story was the least developed of the three, I thought.
Yeah, she's just kind of the point of view character, but I think like the story that they're trying to tell and about these characters and the homelessness and stuff like that, it does just enough to get its point across. Like if these characters were like truly underdeveloped, like the story would kind of just fall apart and wouldn't make sense, or it wouldn't have the impact that it does.
Yeah, I believe I agree. I think that they don't develop Miyuki is the lead little girl. I don't think they develop her on purpose because I think it would make her very unlikable. She's not really homeless. She comes from a great family and she's actually quite stubborn and rebellious and a little bit of a brat. She runs away because she feels like she's being controlled, which is very different when you compare that story to Jin, who's like an alcoholic who's lost his family, or Okama, who basically like can't even belong in society. I mean, maybe they hid a lot of Miyuki's character because she wouldn't actually be as liked by the audience. It takes time to understand her.
Yeah, it's definitely a very very deft touch with that character.
Yeah, it's just a personal complaint. Then I thought the backstory stuff was the most interesting part of the movie, and I just found myself wanting more of it.
Well, that's a mark of a good film, then, I think.
Yeah, sure. I should point out, Mary, that the character's name was Hana, and Okama is the Japanese word for transvestite.
I think that's right. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Her name is Hana.
Well, I'm terrible with names anyway.
That's the word they were translating the various slurs into or from.
That's right. They like call her that a lot, and I think I just assumed that was her name.
Yeah, it's one of the weird things in Japanese culture where you'll see it both used as a slur and as a self-identifying thing.
Yeah, it might be a translation. It's probably good to call her by her name and not by transvestite.
Yeah, but like you'll see like otaku used as an inclusive term for that group or as a derogatory thing from people on the outside towards them. I feel like you see that a lot with group identifiers.
Probably the closest analog might be queer in English, because that's used as a slur as well as an inclusive thing.
Yeah. Is that it for Tokyo Godfathers? I think this might have been my least favorite out of the 5. But
no, I guess I liked it more. I think this is probably my third favorite of the Kon films.
Yeah, I think it might not be as brilliantly written as Perfect Blue. I think, the fact that like everything works out in the end is an easy way to end things. But in terms of me enjoying it, watching it and having a good time, it's probably the best one. It's probably the nicest film he ever made, and I really appreciate that because everything else is really sad.
Yeah, this is the one good time.
Paprika had a not unhappy ending.
Paprika's so weird, though.
I don't know what to feel after Paprika. I have
Neither
to take
do
a
I.
nap. I have to go to sleep after Paprika.
I still don't even know if I like that movie. It's so bizarre.
I thought it was not. It was bizarre, but I feel like the story was fairly straightforward.
Well, the story in Paprika is really like kind of messy and unfocused. Like comparing Perfect Blue to Paprika, especially, you can see like there are similar ideas at play there, but one like Paprika is way more unfocused and kind of flips around between different ideas a lot.
Mm. Yeah, it's going full in, right? Because the entire film is about dreams and reality.
Yeah.
And you never know almost at any point ever where you're at.
Yeah.
In fact, you could almost conceive of the entire world always being in dream. It's just hard to tell.
Until like the very, very end. Maybe.
Should we just go into Paprika instead of going in order?
Let's just go into Paprika. Yeah, sure. We already skipped to Tokyo Godfathers. Might as well. Order be damned.
Yeah, so like as I mentioned, I think this, like, personally, I think this is maybe his weakest film. As I mentioned, it's just too messy and unfocused, and doesn't really have like a good singular idea that it's attached to. I mean, I know it's all about dreams and stuff like that, but it, like, particularly with the police officer character when they're flipping around to, like, because his subplot is about like, almost like looking at Satoshi Kon and his relationship with film, and you can kind of like connect dreams and film to being a fairly similar idea, but the way it jumps between the two, it just seems like it loses focus, and it's not as like a strong and cohesive film as Perfect Blue, even though they're similar ideas at play.
Yeah, the cop story felt pretty not with the rest of the story. It felt like it was giving a different topic than the A plot, I guess we can call it.
I think I had trouble as well following all of the characters, which ones were, the main characters that I was supposed to like or empathize with or support and want to succeed. Paprika, I think that's herself, like the girl in the dreams. Like, I never know her motivation. She seems so nice, but I was never really fully aware of who she was or what was going on. So I had a really hard time latching on to her. Like, if I didn't want someone to die or to live, I didn't know if I should have feelings towards anyone because I didn't know who they were.
Yeah, this film really, really lacks like an emotional anchor point. Like, there's just, what am I supposed to root for? I have no idea. It's just too weird for its own good.
It's a visual feast for the eyes, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's mainly what I feel like I'm writing on. I enjoyed the ride of the thing, the visuals, everything that was going on was a fun time, even if the plot was kind of weak. Whereas Tokyo Godfathers, I felt by the end, yeah, I'm about ready for this to be about over, right about when it ended. But this one was like, oh, you could have done a little bit more, I guess. Sure. Maybe explain something. But I could have gone for a little bit more of Paprika, I feel.
I think like the closest thing I might compare this to in terms of another anime movie might be Howl's Moving Castle, where like the plot sort of doesn't make sense and it's kind of nonsense, but like visually it's incredibly impressive.
I can't for the life of me remember the plot of Howl's Moving Castle.
Neither can I.
It's like a relationship.
She turned into an old lady, and then
That's
Howl
right.
was there, and then Billy Crystal was there.
Yeah, I like to compare Paprika to Inception, considering how many things they share, from like blatant scenes that are the same.
Yeah, there's actually going to be a live action version of Paprika, but Inception came out like right then, so it kind of got put on hold indefinitely.
That makes sense. I mean, Inception borrows from Paprika, so literally, not just, in concept of dream and reality space, but how dreams affect reality, and yeah, like actual direction where you can, like that one scene where you're like touching a mirror and it breaks down the reality of the world around you. Like those are just like taken verbatim because you can see the inspiration between the two. And I also found myself in Inception somewhere towards like 3/4 the way through, just being like, all right, I get it. You're going farther and farther in, but like you're losing me in the context of what I'm supposed to be caring about. Because you get so immersed in the concept of dream and reality and where you are, you forget to care about a character or what anyone's doing in these dreams. So I think at some point during this film, you pour yourself a drink and then you just really enjoy the crazy parade scene and you say that was wild. I kind of felt like that during Fooly Cooley as well. Like at some point, it's such a visual sensory overload that you don't know what to do anymore.
It's not a question of turn your brain off to watch the movie. It's the movie forces your brain into standby.
The movie told you weren't smart enough to process it, so you just accept it.
Yeah, like some of the scenes in this movie, it's like having taken LSD without actually having taken LSD. It's just, some of them are completely bizarre and wild. Like, in that way, like, considering some of the stuff that we've watched for Anime Kiwi since I saw these for the first time, I respect Paprika and what it does a lot more now.
This kind of gives me a cat soup vibe going back to older stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, it's very experimental.
There's just cool art happening. And Paprika also has some fucking rad music to it, too.
Oh, yeah, it really did. And I mean, again, like, just to give credit to that parade scene, like, that's the part where dreams are breaking reality. So we're in reality and dreams are breaking through. So the parade actually is having an impact on, like, human people. And it's just so amazingly executed. You can't look away, and there's so many things to look at. You can actually watch this film multiple times and probably miss things each time. There's just so much going on, and that's not just a testament to Kon, but also the animators, who I think worked probably tirelessly to make all these fluid animations.
Yeah, this is probably the most beautifully animated of the 5, I would say, like by a long shot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's, if you like films visually,
as good as Perfect Blue was, this is how good animated this was, if that analogy makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And like going back to the transitions, some of the most wild and outrageous transitions and scene changes happen in Paprika, straight up to the point where people are just like falling from the sky, and you know, somebody's like riding by and you go into a design in their shirt and that's the next scene. Like, that's just a wild thing that only Kon would conceive of and actually execute.
Yeah.
I think like the really interesting thing about that cut is in the Every Frame a Painting episode, he doesn't even know what to call that transition. Like, that's how unusual it is.
It's real cool.
There's no name for it. They should just call it a cone. It's like so absurd. It's not a jump cut. You're just like, it's like that thing where you have a mirror against a mirror and you can see indefinitely between the two. It's like that. You're just like going into something and then now you're in a new one. It was in there the whole time.
It's super cool.
Yeah, like Mikey and I actually noticed some of, like, there are a couple of scene transitions in the TV show Chihaya Furu that pretty much lifted from Kon style, whole hog, basically. Like, there's a scene where somebody tears a piece of paper and that transitions into the next scene. Stuff like that.
Yeah, that show had its moments.
Yeah, it had two.
I thought it had more moments. You just don't like happy things.
Yeah, like that's the backstory here. I don't like Chihaya Furu at all, really.
I think the best way to watch Paprika is how I did it, and that is basically right after you wake up and you're not all the way conscious yet.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I fell asleep about 2 minutes into it last night, and then I woke up this morning saying, shit, I need to watch this before we record tonight, and we're going out in 2 hours. Let's put this on now.
That dream dreamlike state. He loved that, didn't he? In fact, like they also showed his final movie, Ohio, which is about a girl waking up and how our reality bends in our consciousness while we're actually actively waking up.
Yeah.
So when your alarm goes off, you're not really there yet, and you're achieving all these things. You're like drinking water, you're getting a shower, you're brushing your teeth, you're washing your face, you're doing all these things. You probably don't actually hit full consciousness until like maybe you're walking down the sidewalk to get your bus. So there's all this stuff happening where your body's doing all these things, but you're not even there. You're not even like fully there yet. Like, that's pretty much Paprika.
Yeah, like even this morning, I wasn't fully awake until after I'd watched Paprika and driven out to Anaheim. I'm like, oh, I don't remember that hour drive, but I guess I'm here now.
That's probably a pretty bizarre experience going from watching Paprika and then like going out into the world and just that movie kind of sitting in your brain as you're trying to experience reality around you.
Well, it was going to Disneyland, so it's not really reality. So
That's probably made it even more bizarre. But yeah, like I'm in that state at the moment. Actually, I've only been awake for about a couple of hours, and I was up until like 4 a.m. yesterday just because it's the Australian general election, and yeah, it went weirdly. I'll put it that way.
Who did you guys decide on the election?
Well, like I'll put it this way, like at the time I went to bed last night, 10 million votes had been counted, and there was 8,000 votes separating the two main parties.
Jeez.
I actually missed that. It's been a while since I've been involved in your guys' government. When I lived there for a couple of years, it was Julia Gillard, and I followed it moderately because I found it really fascinating. It seemed like nobody liked her, but then everybody liked her when she was gone. It was weird.
That's exactly like the thing with Labour governments is they're very competent, like economically. So everybody always misses them when they're gone. When the Liberals mess up the economy.
This is a huge tangent, but yeah, I find your guys' government's really fascinating. Also, the entire time I lived there, everyone gave me shit for how insane our government was. But I do think you guys are like sensationalist too, just in a different way. Just like ours is a bit more of a House of Cards / like strange reality TV show. You guys just aren't happy with anybody.
Yeah, like the way that we exaggerate our politics is it's kind of like four people getting into one of those revolving like doors and getting stuck in it. And that's basically Australian politics in a nutshell.
Yeah. They call that Three Stooges syndrome, where you like have all these people trying to get through a door at once and nobody can.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I guess I should probably elaborate that when I say liberals, I don't mean like American type liberals for anybody who's watching like outside of Australia. Like, that's the name of the right-wing party, and it's really confusing for foreign people.
Yeah, you also have like a Labour Party.
Have they thought about picking a better name?
Well, they were named back in 1945 when that's kind of what liberalism was, I guess, and they haven't really changed much. But yeah, like that's an interesting side note into what happened last night, and I'm kind of still in that Ohio mode. Like, reality doesn't seem quite normal at the moment.
Yeah, Japan's like that too. I think the Liberal Party is still pretty right wing. I have to check.
Yeah, there's actually like a bunch of parties around the world named the Liberal Party that happen to be right wing, which is probably confusing for Americans. Like, according to some right-wing like radio hosts, liberalism is a mental disease or something.
Yeah, the ruling party in Japan is the LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, and they're pretty right-wing. I think their leader's kind of a shitbird who's fucking stuff up. But that's neither here nor there.
If you've had the same ruling party for, what is it, like 40 years or something in Japan?
Since democracy became a thing in Japan, except for 1 year when they lost, and they were very unhappy, and they kicked that government out and brought this one back.
Yeah, it probably goes to your head if you've been in power for that long.
Yeah, but Japanese politics are a whole other thing that I have feelings about, and we won't go into here.
That's quite a tangent, but that is interesting.
Yeah. Well, we're no stranger to tangents. Half of our episodes of Anime Kiwi end up being about whatever game we're playing.
We're like the giant bomb of anime.
We talked about Doom for half an hour on the last episode.
Oh, Doom's so good, man.
Doom's pretty good. Do you want to get to Millennium Actress?
Might as well.
Millennium Actress stood out to me out of these more than.
I think it might be my favorite.
This is probably second for me.
It's so good. It's so brilliantly written and directed. I mean, it starts talking about changing the way you're going to portray a story, right? It starts at the end. It's starting, in the scene where she's like getting into the ship and she's like going into space. And you're like, what's going on? This has got to be a film, right? Because it's like makes no sense, like why you would just be watching her get into a ship and it's transitioning out to a guy like watching it and reversing it and then going to see the actress, and you get this beautiful story, all taken at different places. So it kind of it has some standard storyline arc to it, right? Where it's going from the beginning of her life to the end, but it's constantly jumping and you never know where you are in this story. You never know what pieces you might have missed along the way. And they, on purpose, remove bits of information throughout her life story so that it can come in the end and you can get this full vision of her love and her passion, and then it all culminates in like this beautiful end line that I just love more than anything else, which is that like she loved him, but she loved finding him more. And I love that. Like, it's such a wonderful concept of love itself, is it's not just about the love that you feel for another person, but it's about the drive. And she loved the hunt, man. She loved going and find this perfect person. She knew nothing about this guy. But she loved the concept of him so much, and she loved the actual aspect of going to get this guy, to the point where that was actually her achievement in the end. Didn't even matter if they didn't end together. In fact, that's a worse ending. It's a better ending that they didn't live happily ever after, and like that's so uncommon in romance stories such as this, that it's not about her winning.
As far as I can tell, she didn't get any closure at all, because I don't know if the documentarian even told her that he found out that the police officer had killed him.
No, he doesn't ever tell her. So that is stated in a different scene towards the end. He never actually conveys it, but what's really cool about it is I think she didn't need the closure. Towards the end of it, like when she's in the ship, she's kind of saying why she's at peace with it. And it's was not so much about him, although that's the way you feel the whole film, but at the end it's really about her and her journey, and it's about her evolution.
And to her, it's not even ending. It's she's saying, hey, I'm coming to where you are again. Watch out.
Like, the thing that really bums me out about this is because, like, going back to the the final line of the film, is I had kind of an opposite reaction to it, so it kind of bums me out that I had a negative reaction to it, because this is kind of like I guess a personal preference when it comes to filmmaking, but I don't like it when there's a film that has like a certain like central theme that the entire film is exploring, and as you mentioned, it's with her drive to find this man and like kind of the passion that she has for just like having the drive to fantasize about this person, I guess, in a sense. But when she outright just spells that out as like the final line and doesn't leave it to subtext and is kind of like, by the way, this is the theme of the film, did you get it? And I'm like,
pretty literal.
I you didn't have to spell it out, film. I got it. You didn't have to say it literally. But yeah, like I guess that's only my two core criticisms of this film is like that final line. I thought it was brilliant up until that one particular line. I think it kind of spoils the ending a little bit. And on top of that is the soundtrack is kind of cheap and doesn't really, like, it just doesn't sound as good as the film looks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I felt that this film especially was making effective use of the silence thing. So I felt the music wasn't as important as it was just kind of there to let the silence do its thing.
It's just like, you know, in my spare time, just for fun, I sometimes download like a MIDI track of a Final Fantasy song or something, and then I'll get a bunch of VSTs and which are like virtual instruments, and like make a remastered, like remix version of that song. And I've like made versions of those songs that sound better than the stuff in the soundtrack. It just sounds like somebody had like a Casio keyboard or something and set it to the strings section, and it just sounds really cheap and kind of bad.
You just have a thing against strings, I'm telling, because you complained about the strings in Chihaya Furu too.
Well, it didn't tonally fit the show. It's just too
I think
overly
you just don't
dramatic.
like strings.
Hey, I love strings, man. It's like one of my favorite instruments. You just gotta use it right.
It's hard to tell from this.
I'm looking at a stringed instrument right now. Actually, I got a violin underneath my bed, but I broke the bow.
Oh, on purpose?
Probably. Fuck you, Bo. Snap over the knee. You have a violin just to torture it.
I'm not going to take these lies. I love the violin. Fuck you guys.
I'm going to edit that you're telling the violin to fuck off.
I think in most of Cohen's films, I always remember it being highlighted by audio, and I don't think I could tell you one memory from Millennium Actress that was enhanced by the track. I can't think of any. So if it didn't have an impact on me, I think that is a little bit of a failure, right? Because music is supposed to help convey the emotion and the value of a scene, and so if you can't really remember it, then something was wrong there. So yeah, I guess I don't really recall any of the audio from it. I do recall a lot of really tremendous transitions, again, like these Cohen specialties that he does so well, because you're transitioning. Again, he loves actresses. Like, this is something that he keeps coming back to, and I think it's because this is one of the things he likes transitioning from, right? It's not just dream and awake, right? And this one, it's, are you watching a scene, or are you watching reality, or are you watching a memory, or are you watching reality? And they blend it from the very get-go, and he goes into the lady's house and she starts to tell them the story of her childhood. And all of a sudden, the camera guy's in the room with them and the producer in her childhood home. And you're like, wait, this is weird. Why are they here? And he impacts that with them actually interacting with her and having impact in the story, which at first you think is just a strange thing that they're doing to blend her memories and them being within her memories. But then you find out that the producer actually literally did have impact in her memories. Like, he actually was there in a lot of these very monumental and important scenes in her life. So I think that's really fascinating. But he does a fantastic job of transitioning again. There's this one that I love so much that I have to describe, is when she's on a train to see that dude, and all of a sudden the train derails and there's all these people that are burning the train, and they're coming, and she's trying to open the door and she can't open it, and she's pulling and pulling and pulling, and she can't open the door, and they're freaking out, and everyone thinks they're gonna like burn to death. And then the door hits the key and it makes like a ding noise. Right as that happens, she opens the door and they're in a new scene. And I think she's immediately in like another world, like she's in another era. She's dressed completely differently. She just like walked into the next scene as if that scene was over, but there was something really important happening, but they just skip it. They skip all this action and go to the next monumental point in her life. And it's so seamless that it actually took me a couple minutes to process what just happened. I had no idea that I was no longer in that train. I actually had no idea what was going on.
I think like Millennium Actress might be his most like audacious film, as in this is the one that takes the most risks when it comes to that transition stuff, because like there are scenes where like it cuts between the different eras in a span of like 10 seconds. Like you'll get 3 or 4 different eras, and he's constantly doing that, and then you're combining like the documentarian being inside the eras themselves, and then the eras start like coalescing with her personal story, and then like it's melded in this really, really complex way, but it all works. Like we really, really have to emphasize that the screenplay of this movie in particular is like absolutely brilliant and one of the most like deft and like well pulled off screenplays I've ever seen in a movie, like ever. This is a brilliant, brilliant movie, and I love it a whole lot.
Yeah, by all means, this should be Paprika, shouldn't it? It should be like super confusing. You should have no idea what's going on. You don't understand why they're impacting her world and why everything keeps changing and constantly evolving. And she's in different clothes and she falls. And then when she actually lands from the fall, she's in different clothes again and she's in a new area. You should be so confused, but you know what's going on. And the difference is between this film and Paprika is there's a very constant theme and one character that you're following this girl. She's in love with the guy, but she can't get to him. And it's so consistent that you, from all this wild craziness that's happening to her, you can always center on the fact that you know what she's thinking and what she's going to do. She's trying to find this guy.
Yeah, this is probably the movie of these four that I would soonest go back to.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to kind of have a stronger idea of like, because what you already know what's going on in the plot and everything, so you can kind of see where they sprinkle in details that you might not have noticed the first time.
Mm.
And the real star of this movie to me was the color palette of the whole thing. You can kind of use the saturation level as a shorthand for where in the timeline the characters are.
Yeah, you've got like very gray for the
Yeah, the farther back it is, the less saturated the characters are, unless it's the documentarian and the cameraman who are full saturation.
Yeah, like the current day with the documentarian is very like a lot of yellows and reds and that kind of autumn look. And then you've got like the samurai movie is very desaturated, very gray looking. And then the World War II era, I guess, is very desaturated as well.
Yeah, it gets more saturated the farther towards present day Chiyoko you get.
And like the era of the movie when they're showing like the later parts of her career and everything, it's kind of got like a blue tone to it.
Yeah. And also during the very first period when it's her childhood stuff, some, like mostly the reds on the Japanese flag are present day saturated. So you'll get some stuff that is way brighter than everything surrounding it to make it really pop real good.
That's fascinating that like they kept the world fairly desaturated, but they let the color of their flag, right? Because the Japanese flag is so iconic, the red dot, and they kept that super saturated maybe to help emphasize if you're seeing all these flags, it could be heavy movement in terms of war or government action. So it through the background conveying what's happening with in culturally in her world at that time.
Yeah, and I think like the blood and stuff was full color too. I don't think that was desaturated.
Mm.
Yeah, the blood colors in Cotton's films are always really striking and very vibrant.
Yeah, which that might be related to why the Japanese flag was full color too, to link those two ideas really strongly.
What did you guys think of the I'm not sure what they called her, but she had like this spool of thread and she kept telling the actress that she hated her, but she also loved her so much.
I have her written down as the ghost lady. The actress was calling her a wraith, I think, was the subtitle.
Yeah, basically like a little monster lady.
I forget. I didn't pay attention to what the Japanese was.
What did you guys think of what she represented or what she was?
I was kind of confused by it until they kind of gave the reveal on it. I wasn't sure how it would fit in, if that was from a movie that she was going to do at some point. I wasn't sure if that was from the scene that she first appeared in, or if it was a mental thing, or what the deal with it was. And I thought the reveal was kind of but
well, if you look at it literally, she's spinning a yarn, you know, and I think that character kind of represents the story that she's telling herself, as in she's pursuing this man throughout the whole film, and that's like a story that she tells herself, and I think that's what that character kind of symbolizes.
Okay, I didn't think of it like that, but that works.
Yeah, like the darkness of her saying it's your fate is almost like her conveying to herself even early as a young girl, like the first time she sees the wraith, that she's going to spend her life pursuing but never finding, but that will bring her joy in a sense. So it was like she was telling herself the whole time, the ability to pursue this happiness is what will bring you joy, but not the actual result of getting it.
Yeah.
It's like the character has joy, but it's never like a full joy. She's never has that closure that we talked about before. It's always like there's the joy of not having closure, and I think that's really interesting because, like, in my personal life, I consider the idea of like that full joy and having that closure as being very important. But to take away something that kind of poignant from this film, that maybe that doesn't really matter all that much, and that the pursuit is enough, is, even though they spell it out in the end, and I think that's kind of hitting over like the audience over the head with the theme. Like, the theme itself is very poignant and very important, and it's something that we should all consider in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's how often is it said to us that the journey is what matters, not the destination? But like, this entire film is dedicated to that, and it takes so much like sadness and exhaustion. And like, how often is she upset and she's running and she's desperate to find him and she can't get him? But that is her story. Her story isn't getting to him. Her story is straight up the journey of trying to get to him. But I think that is, and although I agree with you, like the literal text at the end might be a bit overdone, but it's kind of trying to make sure that the audience understands, because this might seem like a depressing film, but it's not. And I think it was important to show that she's not broken, that the actual state of her going after this and spending her life trying for something gave her purpose and a lot of joy.
Yeah, I agree that the ending could be misinterpreted, so Kon wanted to make sure people were on the same page with him before he let him go out the door.
Yeah, I think if we look at the film as being like the message of the film being so important that if the audience didn't understand it, that like the purpose of the film was completely lost and pointless, then that they needed to make sure that the audience understood. I think that kind of gives you an idea of just how poignant and important the movie's message is that, the fact that they kind of hit you over the head with it. Like, I guess I'm kind of coming around on the ending now, that if you put it that way, that it was so important for him that the audience understand that he kind of broke a rule in filmmaking in a way. So, yeah, like, I guess I respect the ending a lot more than I used to, having heard about it put in that term. But yeah, like, the whole the journey being the important part and not the destination, like, if you put it in those terms, it's just a platitude and it doesn't really mean anything. And the fact that this is an entire movie about that idea explored in a really thorough and meaningful way, I don't think I've seen a movie quite like it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you wouldn't think that you could even spend an entire movie dedicated to such a concept, right? It seems like it should be a short film at best to convey like that getting there doesn't matter. It's the journey. Like, what a generic thing to say. But they really fill the time. And I never once thought, and a lot of this is the visual direction that Kon gives, that treatment to all of his work. But I was never bored. I was never tired of the same thing. It was the same thing the entire time. She was trying to pursue someone, but there was just so much going on. There was so much context. There was so much visual stimulation of all the different scenes that she was in, and whether or not she was acting or she was in a dangerous situation for real, or whether or not she was upset. And again, the transitions blended everything so smoothly that you never felt like you had stopped and are starting again. I think that was a huge testament to this film that required his touch. I think if anyone else did this, it wouldn't have worked. There was like this other time where there was like this big explosion, and the smoke from the explosion turned into clouds into the next scene. And it's just like, that should be another day. That should have been a fade into a new day. But he didn't want you to be like, oh, that part's done and this part's beginning. This entire film, you believe that you're watching one seamless scene. And that's what helps lock in the fact that you're never bored. You're just watching a very drawn out story that's just elegantly portrayed. I think it's incredibly well done.
It's almost a stream of consciousness. There, I have trouble talking right now, but that's a thing that I always enjoyed in literature. Like there was what was it? I think it was Mrs. Dalloway, a Virginia Woolf novel that did that. And when I had to read that for class, I loved the shit out of that just because it was one thing straight into another without any sort of break. It was just kind of really allowing you to get into the heads of the characters who are telling the story, because they're not going to take a break when they're telling you the thing. They're just going to keep going.
Yeah, I think like my favorite directors are the sorts of filmmakers that can say, well, I'm breaking a filmmaking rule doing this, but I need to do it anyway to tell the story that I've got in my head. And filmmakers that break those rules and make something brilliant like this, like those are my favorite directors. Like for me, like Con has become one of my favorite directors. Like, you know, at the moment I consider people like, you know, like David Lynch or Darren Aronofsky or like those sorts of people as some of my favorite directors, but Con definitely sits there in the same pantheon basically.
Yeah, and I feel like that can be said for literature too, because I feel that's especially appropriate for this. This feels the most literary out of the four things we watched of Cons, where the people who write the really good shit for books are the people who will go out of their way to break rules to make the story better.
Yeah, absolutely. And they go down in history. Like he is the trendsetter. I mean, there's a reason that really famous directors that American directors that we can't get enough of are so inspired by him. And it's because he was the one who broke all these rules successfully.
Yeah. He's showing you how to do it if you're going to do it.
Yeah, like nothing frustrates me more than a director who breaks rules and does so like incredibly unsuccessfully. Yeah. Like this Anime Kiwi stuff with me coming on started on with the compilation movies of Gurren Lagann. I'm not sure if you've seen those.
Mary knows about Gurren Lagann.
Yeah, my puppy's name is Simone because based off of Gurren, because that's my favorite anime of all time, actually.
Yeah, like I keep hearing from people that the TV show itself is really brilliant and good, but I've only seen the compilation movies, and those movies break every rule about filmmaking, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, compilation movies aren't great. That was a poor idea on our part.
Yeah, you should really, and it's a shame actually. I watched the compilations after I watched the series just to see, you know, if there was any. I heard there was additional footage.
There's a little bit.
I was like, oh, I want to see that footage. But damn, do you like miss a lot of the context of the characters and like why you should care. But it's still, you still get a little bit of it through those movies.
The movies are, we talked about this back then, they're for the people who watch the series who want to see it again but don't want to spend 10 hours doing it.
That seems fair.
Yeah, like they want to consume it rather than actually watch it again.
Yeah, they'll let their memory fill in the blank spots.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like they are constantly breaking rules in that series. From these are things that like even now we're like starting to catch up with things like, I don't know, Game of Thrones, right? Where you spend 2 seasons falling in love with a character and then they're like, nah, just kidding, we're gonna kill him. Like that doesn't matter. And you're like, what? I love that guy. Like Gurren was like way back in the day basically being like, we're building up this character. We are building up this character so much that you love him and you like him, and not just kidding, like he's gone. And like they're breaking you down. They changed everything of what you thought like character development was.
Yeah, that movie really fucked up the Kamina thing.
Yeah, and it sucks. Like I hope anyone who hasn't seen this, like hasn't seen it, Gurren is still like the epitome of like wonderful story, and like it won't shock you that much. Like it's a good regardless. So like I would still 100% tell people to pick it up. But
yeah, skip the movies.
Yeah, skip the movies. Watch the full thing. Like get involved in these characters, and then watch how much it grows. Watch how much as soon as you feel like you're comfortable and you're just watching a series about people versus mechs, that all of a sudden it's not, and then it's about then it's about the world, and then it's about the universe. Then it's just constantly adding and adding and adding, and that's, we're going on another tangent now because you've gotten me started, but I feel like people who break the rules go down in history. You either do it and you fail and you learn from that and you try again, or you do it and you change the game forever and everyone remembers you.
Or you do it and you fail spectacularly and don't fix it, and then everyone still remembers you as a fuck up.
I would rather be known as a fuck up than as somebody who did everything the same as everyone else before me.
It's just so interesting that like the TV version, like the TV show version of that show is about breaking rules in a successful way, and the compilation movies version are about breaking rules in an incredibly unsuccessful way.
Yeah.
Like I think I was burned by those movies so hard that it would probably take me quite a lot to actually watch the TV series, and that's probably unfair and on the TV show's part that I have that perspective, but it's such a hard mental hump to get over. Like, I keep thinking to myself, one day I'll go back to that show, but boy, I didn't like those movies.
Yeah, well, it probably broke you in a bad way. I would say the show should be viewed in its entirety. I mean, you basically watched a quick compilation. I mean, imagine if someone took Game of Thrones and condensed it into 2 hours and you watched it. You wouldn't give a shit about anybody and you'd be really confused and it would be boring.
You read the Wikipedia article on Gurren Lagann.
Yeah, it's just too much too fast.
A compilation movie of Game of Thrones sounds like the worst thing ever.
Yeah, well, you kind of watched that.
Oh boy.
That's what happened.
But anyways, that's all the movies, right?
I think so.
Yeah, looks like it. So what are your guys' thoughts on the set of 5 things as a whole? Let's go.
I think that like as a body of work, it's incredibly sad and depressing that he died so young and wasn't able to continue on his work and explore the themes you see, kind of connect his films together more fully. It's like the saddest thing that I can think of when it comes to filmmakers dying early.
Especially since he had another movie in the works, too.
Yeah, that they just still haven't been able to finish for like 5 years or something. But yeah, like it's one of the strongest bodies of work, even if it's fairly small, that I've seen from a director. And, I think anybody who likes movies should watch all of his stuff, even Paranoia Agent, just because of all the anime stuff I've seen, this is by far the best stuff, and it would be a shame not to have seen it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there might be something. Did you guys hear of Dreaming Machine?
Yeah, that's this movie that was in the works.
Yeah, so it might be a lasting legacy piece. I don't know how much he really got his hands on it before, but some of it, I mean, there was parts of it that were animated already.
Really?
Yep.
Oh,
I think
it says
not even half, but I think there some of it was animated.
Wikipedia is telling me 600 of 1,500 shots have been animated.
That's, I mean, to me, there's enough of him in there that it's possible that one day that will be finished. So there could be legacy in there and something for people to look out for. I mean, if that film ever came out, that would be just such a wonderful thing to experience, his last vision, even if it's not fully him. I think it will be really amazing to see.
From what I'm seeing, the writing is finished and Khan left his directorial tapes and notes and stuff. And that looks like storyboards are done too. So it's, from what I'm seeing, the guy who's taken the project onto himself, who's the head of Madhouse Studios, has said he doesn't think at this point that getting funding will be a problem, since Kickstarter and crowdfunding for anime is a thing that has been proven now. He's saying that the biggest challenge is finding somebody of Khan's caliber, or even close to Khan's caliber, to take over in the direction of it.
Those are pretty big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Perhaps the biggest. The only thing that worries me, though, is that this might be another AI situation. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but one of the final films that Stanley Kubrick was working on before he died was AI, and the film was eventually taken up by
I know AI, and that's upsetting.
Yeah, like it was taken up and completed by why am I
Spielberg?
blanking on his name? Yes, Spielberg basically took up the film and completed it for him, and it's a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
It is.
Imagine taking a genius's work and somehow like ruining it. I mean, that's just like sounds heartbreaking. And I don't know if, especially again, if we're going to like talk about like Japanese culture, like nobody wants to take that on and fail. I mean, that's very, very difficult and stressful to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pride involved in accepting another man's legacy and completing it.
Yeah, but the head of Madhouse seems pretty committed to it. I think he's said that he's going to do his best to get it done before he loses the chance completely. So let's hope something good gets done. He seems like
I hope he does.
Yeah, he seems like he has the best in mind for it. That he won't let it get turned into a pile of shit.
Yeah, we can only hope.
When I think back on his body of work and how each of us have a different piece that we love the most or respect the most, and again, like I can enjoy watching one film the most and yet respect another film the most or admire another one visually or the writing of another one. Each of them are brilliant in their own respect, in their own regard, and there's no failures. There's just nothing wrong with any of them. They're all wonderful, beautiful works of art. He was a genius and he was a trendsetter. And as we had said before, he was a risk taker and he did it in a tremendous way. I think that he really made people question the culture of Japan in both good and bad ways. He pushed genres, he pushed female characters, and he pushed visual art in terms of transitions and direction. So he has a legacy even without finishing that final film, because you're going to see people putting his work into theirs for time and time to come. I don't think you'll ever actually see the end of him because people will constantly be inspired by his work and then emulate it in future videos. So it's a tremendous legacy that he had. And I look forward to seeing more ways in which people can interpret his art.
And if you want a little bit more Satoshi Kon too, he has a collection of, I think they're short story comics. I think it's called Opus, the collection is. And it's not anime, but it's his drawings and stories.
Well, I'm gonna get on that first thing probably after this. But yeah, like the thing that I find myself identifying with Kon on more like a personal level very strongly is like I think stories about men in film and everything are just kind of boring now. Like I've seen every permutation of stories about men, and the fact that he thought that like in a similar way that stuff's boring and that he's going to explore female characters and everything. Like I just treasure that sort of thing from directors like him. Like I don't want to watch another like Jason Bourne movie or something like that. There's nothing you can mine out of that.
It's the string music of film.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you like female development and you guys are on this anime train, I would recommend Wolf Children.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was one of the...
I should probably give that another chance.
Yeah, that was one of the films that we were going to watch, I think, along with The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which I haven't seen yet as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great too.
I saw Wolf Children in Japan when it was in theaters, and I really bounced off it really hard. But that might also be because I had an imperfect understanding of the movie, since I am not fluent in Japanese.
I think it's very dialogue heavy, so it would be probably hard to convey.
I got probably about like 75% of it, so there's probably some nuance I was missing, since everyone seems to love it, so I was probably missing some crucial thing.
It's got really honest characters in it, from like mother to daughter and son. It's really good to watch them grow and learn who they are. So yeah, I would recommend that if you like that if you like those types of stories.
We could probably make Wolf Children the next special if Mikey agrees.
We could, whenever that comes up, if we do another one before we start Monster.
Well, hopefully I don't spend Monster, miserable like I kind of was with Chiaifu in some spots.
I think you'll like Monster. I think you'll like Monster a lot.
Well, hopefully.
I hope so too, because I like Monster a lot. Anyways, I think we've reached the end of this.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on to talk about one of my favorite directors.
Yeah. So this has been Movie Kiwi, Anime Kiwi. Oh, no, I didn't check. Mary tweeted out the email address.
Oh yeah, I may wonder if anyone wrote in a question or comment.
And the answer is no one did that.
I got some tweets about it. Of course, people don't. people find it easier to just tweet it back, I guess. Let's see what some people said. I know some people were just mentioning that they loved him a lot. Really wish someone would license the Blu-rays for USA. Sounds like some people have trouble actually obtaining his work.
Yeah, Paprika's the only one I think that came out in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Or else I'd probably have them. Paprika's the only one I have a physical copy of.
Yeah, I think a lot of them you can actually watch for free. You can stream them, but not in high quality. And that is a problem with a lot of his work.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like, without spelling it out, like, there are ways to get this stuff. And I'm not going to condone or explain that, but,
if you watch anime, you know your ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a rule, actually. My rule is if I can reasonably pay for it and receive it within a reasonable amount of time, I will pay for it, because I do not like stealing. Like, I'm at a point where I have a job, I have a career, I can afford it. If I can pay for it, I'm going to do it. When it comes to anime, I have to break that rule all the time because I actually cannot find it. I cannot find it, or I cannot acquire it within a reasonable amount of time legally.
Like, even Paranoia Agent, the discs for that shows in licensing hell. The discs for that are like, last I checked, they're like $100 a pop.
Yeah, that's insane. Why would you pay that? Like, I don't have, like, a paying job currently. Maybe Game Kiwi will rake in the YouTube bucks one day, but yeah, I could never afford to pay that for Paranoia Agent, and I love that show,
Looks like the current
insane.
going for a full set is $130-ish.
That's just like broken.
And eBay just popped an arrow onto my screen that looks like a fly, and I whacked my monitor trying to kill it. Oh, unless you want a bootleg version of Paranoia Agent being sold on eBay for $20.
That's kind of weird and messed up. But, like, just, like, think about that for a second. This is one of the greatest directors to have lived, and some of the best movies, like, ever made, literally. And his work isn't easily obtainable. Like, how messed up is that?
It's pretty fucked.
Yeah, well, a lot of people who, like you were saying earlier, like anime, this is no shock, because it's always so hard to obtain those things. Like, that's why I was never able to get into anime until, like, later on in life, because I never even knew that it existed until, like, way too late. I think it was, like, past my teens when I, like, realized that some of the most beautiful movies weren't American. They weren't made in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think we all have similar experiences like that. Like, the first time that I saw Perfect Blue, I think I was like 16 years old, and it was on a channel called SBS in Australia, which is like the hipster channel kind of. And, like, that experience stuck with me for so long that I've been kind of obsessed with that idea of trying to find more anime like that, and that's kind of what led us down this road. That was like 12 years ago or something.
Gave you a couple of them. Got you that Angel's Egg.
I was actually talking with Random Battle, which is the guy who did that episode with us about Angel's Egg earlier today, and he's still angry about the fact that we like that movie so much.
It's a good fucking movie.
It's so good.
That's the biggest undersell I've ever had for something, him pitching that movie to us.
Yeah, like, if I'm not sure if you've seen this movie, Mary, but it's free on YouTube, isn't it? Like, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's shady that it's there, but yeah, you can get it on YouTube.
It's probably licensing issues.
Which one is?
It's called Angel's Egg. I think it's like 70 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, if you've got some spare time and you like really like powerfully weird and ominous, like art house anime. This is like
possibly the artiest movie I've ever seen.
It sounds right up my alley. We'll give that a whirl.
It is like, if you like art films, it is the dopest shit.
It's super good.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I'll check it out.
And then you can go to the live action movie they did and just kind of splice that stuff in there. It's real weird and not very good, but is kind of okay at the same time.
It was okay in the way that the worst movies ever made can be okay and enjoyable.
It's like a C movie. It's like a no-budget sci-fi thing that they decided to put some completely unrelated anime scenes in.
Yeah, like
getting mixed messages here.
Well, basically what happened is a filmmaker, I forget what his name was, but he's this no-name like foreign filmmaker working in America, and he licensed the footage for Angel's Egg, which is this very bizarre art film, and he made like a post-apocalyptic film, and then he edits scenes from Angel's Egg randomly into that post-apocalyptic film and mashes them together and changes the story completely of Angel's Egg, and it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
All right.
And if you need anything to sell you more on Angel's Egg, all the art is done by Yoshitaka Amano, the Final Fantasy cover art, concept art dude.
Oh.
So it's that kind of real, whimsical, fantasy-looking stuff.
Yeah, it sounds good. All right, I'll give that a whirl.
Yeah, it's super good. Anyways, let's let Mary go here. So this has been Movie Kiwi or Anime Kiwi or some weird chimera thing. If you want to email us about this or future things, you can reach us at anime@gamekiwi.net. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/gamekiwi. We're on Twitter and Facebook as The Game Kiwi. And we're on iTunes as PodKiwi. I think that's all of our stuff. Is there anything that you want to plug, Mary? Or tell them where they can get more of you or any of that good stuff? Whatever you want.
Yeah.
With carte blanche.
Thanks. I got nothing to plug specifically right now, but working on some good stuff. So if you guys do like video games as well as anime, you can see a lot of my work on GameSpot, or you could just follow me on Twitter and I'll keep you up to date on anything that I'm working on right now.
Okay, then. So let's...
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, it was great. Like, it was cool.
Thank you for joining us. I know
glad to be here.
We took 2 hours out of your Saturday here. So
it's all good. This is a good Saturday, and I got to spend the morning refreshing a lot of work from Satoshi Kon, which is awesome. So this is not a hassle. I would watch his stuff anytime.
But anyway, this has been whatever this is. I'm Mike.
I'm Katdodo.
Am I supposed to say my name too?
Yeah.
I'm Mary.
Thanks for listening, and as always, keep it juicy. Anime? Movie? I don't know. Keep it something. Bye.